Welcome back to our YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen. I've been away due to some unavoidable circumstances and I'm now back. Very many people have been worried ever since the news that William Ruto and Raila Odinga were going to have a roundtable talk to have a truce about what is happening in the country. And if you look at the side that is represented by Rigathi Gachagua, they feel that their space could easily be taken if Raila gets into a handshake with William Ruto. Something that Raila has said that is not interested in. Raila says their talk is meant to ensure that Kenyans get their economic, social and political right. And so he has made it very clear that there's not going to be anything to do with the handshake. But the Rigathi Gachagua side is really obsessed about the handshake. Now, Raila supporters also feel that should he make a mistake of getting into a handshake, then he might decide to sleep with this regime, and so he might forget the fight against justice that Kenyans have always been yearning for and something that Raila has always presented. But I have a feeling that we have seen the first signs and symptoms that Kenyan citizens are going to gain tremendously in these talks. I don't know what is going to happen, whether Raila himself as an individual and the Azimio fraternity, the leaders, I don't know whether they are going to gain. They might not gain so much as leaders, but Kenyans are really going to gain. And William Ruto, if you have studied the way he does his politics, he will be speaking to his supporters and he will be presenting to them what is music to their ears, what they want to hear. And a good example is the 5-day tour that he engaged in Mount Kenya. And he kept on assuring them that they were not going to be talking. In fact, if you listened to them, they looked like these talks were not going to be anything serious. People like Ndindi Nyoro even told William Ruto to stop these conversations about dialogue and told him to concentrate so much about building the economy. But when they started, I realized that this thing was very serious, more than what I saw them talking about in Mount Kenya. But what caught my attention so much was the fact that William Ruto, having realized that what was on the table was so serious and pertinent, he decided to make a U-turn. The recent pronouncement that they have returned the subsidies that they had abandoned is something that cannot be taken lightly. And it is something that has been done intentionally. If you have studied the politics in our country, you know very well that one of the things that Raila Odinga had put on the table as part of the agenda that was going to be discussed was how to reduce the cost of living. In fact, it was the cost of living that prompted the nation to go to the street. It is the high cost of living that prompted the dissatisfied citizens to go and protest. And it elicited a very dirty reaction from the government when people were killed, people were maimed, several leaders, especially from the Azimio side, were really intimidated and harassed. So it was going to form the major part of the discussions that Raila Odinga had presented in the dialogue. So William Ruto, noting very well that he had been cornered and boxed into a very uncomfortable corner, he decided to bring subsidies. Because I remember Raila was telling this government that Uhuru Kenyatta, in his wisdom, initiated the subsidies on fuel, on unga, on token, even in school fees to cushion the government against it was immediately after the corona pandemic. So it was to help them. Now, William Ruto, because he was siding with his masters, the IMF and the World Bank, had cautioned him to abandon all the subsidies against the chagrin of the common citizen who are really, really suffering. So William Ruto has decided to reduce the cost of living so that by the time they get to serious talks around the table, Kimani Chungwa and Kalonzo Musyoka on the other side, Kimani will have a very good starting foundation. He will tell the Kalonzo side that we have introduced subsidies, and so we are so much committed about reducing the cost of living. This is very contrary and a sharp U-turn from what they had told us. I remember when William Ruto realized that this was the biggest conversation, he called a press conference and said that it is the prerogative of the government of the day to, put the policies that they had sold to Kenyans during the campaigns and ensure that they implement in their own way how to reduce the cost of living. And they told off the opposition that the opposition can never purport to advise the government on how to reduce the cost of living. And so they had bragged, they chest thumped, and they said that according to them, they can never and will never subsidize consumption because they said this is just unsustainable. And they have assured the nation that their way is to subsidize production because they say this is sustainable. And according to them, it is about subsidizing fertilizers. Notwithstanding the fact that it has been revealed that when they were given free fertilizer donation from Russia, they decided to sell it to farmers under the guise of subsidies. And they said that they will not listen to opposition when it comes to reducing the cost of living. Now they have realized that they are on the wrong. And they have said now they are introducing the subsidies. And this tells you, ladies and gentlemen, that economic or political freedom can never be given freely if people don't go up there to demand for it. Why not for the people who went to the streets? Why not for the people who paid by their blood? And we really, really need to even respect and mourn those who have been killed. Because it is because of them that William Ruto is now, because of that pressure, he's reintroducing the subsidies. And I also want to salute Raila Odinga. People have said that this man is old, he should go home. But when I look at the result, the fruits of his actions, I realize that we still need Raila Odinga in our political scene. And I'm not saying that he must vie for a presidency. I'm just saying that we really need him. Because of that pressure. And by the way, he's the one who really paid dearly. His people were killed. And when I say his people, I mean Luos plus all the Azimio fraternity who are following him. They were butchered, they were killed, they were maimed. And then we had those reckless statements from the Inspector General that they were parading hired bodies. But also, because this is something that is in the public domain, William Ruto had said that the subsidies were never reaching the right people. We have always made a lot of noise on these channels that if they knew very well that subsidies were never a bad thing, that the only mechanism that did not really agree well with them was that the subsidies were not reaching the right people. Why could they just reintroduce the subsidies and ensure that it reaches the right people, or they reach the people who they really intend to? Now that they have reintroduced the subsidies, I want to believe that it is not something that is temporary, short term, just for the talks to take place, because I know this government, they might just decide that they are introducing subsidies for the sake of the talks. I hope this is something that they are going to sustain to ensure that if in the last regime it never reached the right people, then it should now reach the right people. They have the mechanism, they have the powers. Uhuru Kenyatta might be smiling wherever he is. He was really, really blamed for everything. Every predicament was pegged. And a finger of blame was pointed at him. Right now, wherever he is, he can see every policy being reintroduced back into this government. He has seen this regime relaunching projects that he had launched, meaning that this regime does not have anything to showcase for us. And I want to appeal that they now decide to introduce it even on the school fees, reduce the subsidies, or even token and everything that Uhuru had given. The lies have been made plain for us, because we've always known that this regime is full of lies. But they are fond of, cheating their supporters to an extent that they can't. The supporters have really buried their heads in the sand, that they cannot realize that this guy is lying to us. I saw the Kenya Kwanza team, the bloggers, trying to justify why now, why they have introduced the subsidies, why now. They are struggling, but you can easily see that even themselves know the truth. It is only that they are trying to wink and lie to Kenyans. They knew from the onset that subsidies were good and were meant to help Kenyans. But because of malice and listening to the West and trying to show that Uhuru was never a good president, they decided to abandon everything that Uhuru did, lifting the ban on GMO that Uhuru had really refused. Now we know, as we have always known, that this regime is full of fallacy, is full of malice. But even as Raila Odinga continues to engage William Ruto, let him pile more pressure and the regime will bow down. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to submit to you that Kenyans, the ordinary citizen, will gain tremendously, because their plight is being listened to after the pressure. I don't know what to think, but that is my take.